Watermelon cantaloupe. Here we go. Um, all right. Very excited to welcome Meir Rotenberg to the show. I met Meir maybe, I don't know, 13 or 14 years ago. We were fellow residents of the Upper West Side and we had common friends. That began a series of professional relationships. And I think it's by this point 4 or 5 full-time employers that have been FinOptimal clients. That's your career from through Jesse's lens. I'm sure I left out a lot. Please help me fill in the blanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mayor,
man.
maybe say something to wake everybody up. That was a little sleepy.
Yeah, whatever. I actually helped run a marketing consultancy for 4 years. That's where I was first a customer.
That
And
was
millennial.
millennial. Yes.
And then I moved into tech. Um, and then from there, that was where I was your second time I was your client. And then I moved to Spiff, where was the third time I was your client.
When you got to Spiff, which you knew was a good opportunity, and you got in on the ground floor around the time of the Series A, you bought in for something like your options were struck at roughly 30, $40 million valuation. And when it sold to Salesforce a couple years ago, that was at over a $400 million valuation. So that was a great partnership that we had from our standpoint, presumably a great exit for you. And, we loved reading. I remember one time you posted about how you were able to close your books in a very small number of days with a very small team, at a company that, sold to big tech for a very respectable valuation. So I was very proud of that. I'm sure you were very proud of it. And I'm really happy to be talking about some of our successes together here today.
Mayor, what I really want to talk to you about is because I feel like there's so many people, you talk to so many people, and so many people come to us through us, and we've really had this like sweet spot as a business of working with like like heads of finance, VP of finance, controller. I feel like that title just gets mixed around, but like when the business feels like, hey, it's time to hire that person for the first time, we are such a great compliment to them, and you seem to always find those people and send them to us. But before we get into any of that, like why did you make that like the first time you stepped into that role, like leaving Hess, going to a startup, what drew you to be that first finance hire at a smaller company?
Oh, no, that was like a crazy story. I quit my job in oil and gas. I worked for 4 years post university, and I went and traveled around the world for a year. I basically saved up enough money to go travel for a year and then have 6 months to find a job. And I figured if at the end of 6 months I don't have a job in New York City, I probably don't deserve to live here. So so on my last day while I was in Barcelona and I was talking with the guy whose apartment I was taking over. I said, where are you moving?" He said, "I'm moving into my new office. I'm starting a company." I said, "Oh, do you need help?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Who's going to do all these things for you?" He says, "I don't know." I said, "I'll do that." And I had no idea what I was doing.
That's
Uh,
it.
that's it.
That's great.
So I started the business on day one. We deposited $100 into the bank account, and we were cash flow positive from day one. Just like because he had a customer to start with, and we were running a marketing agency. And I just picked up all the jobs I could pick up, and I had no experience doing any of them. I had no experience at accounting. I was probably like not so good at accounting in my first job that like I got to an interview when I was leaving there, and I did an interview, and like they grilled me on some portion of accounting, and I totally had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, ah, maybe I should learn this stuff because I just had no applicability in my job at the marketing agency. And my accounting is way better now. My next job we went through like audit and everything, but the is very funny. Basically, all is like self-learned on the job. So what convinced me to do it was it just sounded like fun, and then I generally like have kind of inertia. Once I start doing something, I'm very much all in on it, so I just keep doing that. And so
So one of the most respected people in accounting and finance and startup accounting and finance literally had no idea what accounting and finance was and got a guy on a trip in Barcelona to give him a job. That's
no, he was a friend back in New York.
okay.
I was leaving
That
Barcelona
feels like the least
back in New
important
York.
detail to correct
It
me
was
on
like
there. That is still an unbelievable thing to just like step into that and be where you are now? With I had no idea that you didn't have a formal accounting and finance background.
Well, and I also
I went to
forgot that that was
school.
such a broad role. In my memory, it was, and now that you mention it, I remember it, but that was, you weren't really especially signing up for a finance or accounting role at all. You were just like, hey, what do you need? I'll be that. That's what it sounds like.
Basically. I mean,
That's great.
all of, there's a lot more like client finance and kind of some operational stuff, basically the whole back office. The, I went to school for engineering, Tom, and so accounting is just addition, subtraction, sum division, and in some arcane portions of it, there are like some, derivatives and things that happen, but you just don't have to do that in your day to day at all. And
Yeah,
so, in theory, pretty much anyone who's good at math can learn accounting. It's not that difficult. Uh,
100%.
and so, the truth is, like, it wasn't until after 4 years of doing it that I was like, I should probably learn this stuff that I'm doing. And then I went and taught myself, and I just picked up a book and I read it and I figured it out.
That's basically like me in my job right now.
You don't do a job.
That's very true. So you, so
Yes.
you go
Oh,
from
I
there.
like this. We can do an hour instead of 45 minutes, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We could do. So you go from there to Resolute to Spiff, like clearly along the way, hop, skipping, and jumping up that like finance ladder. You've done it now multiple times. Like you've gone in and like built and or fixed finance functions many times. And I feel like from my experience, I've met people who are like 2 weeks into a role and they're like, "Yeah, I just got hired. I'm new head of finance. I have a investment banking background. I don't know anything about accounting, and then they didn't give me any other resources, so now I have to do bookkeeping too, and or figure out everything else that I'm supposed to be doing." So I'm curious, like when you walk into, like, let's say you walked into a new job today, do it all over. How do you think about the beginning of that journey? Like, how do you think about the first 30, 60, 90, or however you think about it? Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's 1 month, 3 month, 12 months. But like day one, what are you looking for? What are you trying to figure out? What's your roadmap in your head?
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly rewind a little bit about kind of why would you take on such a role?
Yeah.
And like the only good reason is that you have a deep desire to be challenged and to learn. And I would recommend working in tech to like anyone that could do it because you can find yourselves in spaces where every year you can do 3, 4, 5 times as much work as you'll do somewhere else. And that should be exciting to you because if you can do that, then you can accelerate your career at that much faster pace. And in general, the smaller companies you are, the more jobs you can take on. And there's no one who's standing in your way from you to learn those jobs and become an expert at them. And so, in general, like the way I would tell folks in my team at Spiff, it was if you want a job, start doing it and it's your job. Go do it. And so, you work for some big bureaucratic company, you can't just go start doing a job. So that's like for me, maybe I like did work at this level at my first company and then this level at the second company and then the third company was like at this level, right? And so I'm hoping to be way higher at the next company that I'm at. Right. And so it does compound over time. So if I was showing up and I was my first job ever doing this, it's probably pretty hard, right? So you probably need to find a community and find resources and find people to help guide you about, how to handle stuff and know that you're not going to know everything right away. Um, the more you've done it, the more you have heuristics on how to like handle it. So me today, how I kind of approach new company that I'm showing up at is number one, I'm going to go to places where I think I can, be challenged and grow. And so, it kind of depends like where you are in your learning curve, right? It's mm, maybe a better idea to join a slower growing company as your first company so you can learn what you're doing before joining a faster growing company.
That's what Tom did.
Now you're just negging your own company.
At the time.
Um, so what do I think about like right now if I join a new business? It's number one, obviously I have to very quickly learn the business and um, figure out like what's working and what's not working and what the other folks need. But at the same time, for myself, I need to, I mean, maybe it's just me personally, but I need to make sure that the foundation is really solid so that I can work on the business. And so typically I'm going in and cleaning up the accounting side and also cleaning up like on the accounting up the ledger so that I can start to build from there. Because the sooner I do that, the better. Because I'm just going to keep kind of learning an old way of doing things where things are kind of completely messed up. It's much better for me to just kind of very quickly rip the band-aid off and just fix stuff really quickly. And then at the same time, also do that from the aspect of, all the metrics. So maybe the CRM needs complete like cleanup in terms of how things are getting tracked. And just get to a place where I can understand the business and track the metrics, and then very quickly find places where I can get really quick wins to just get rid of busy work. So,
When
you know,
you say clean up like the ledger and stuff like that, like what are some of the things you're looking for? Or is it chart of account structure? Is it tech? Is it like what are the things when you go in day one, you're like, oh yeah, like we got to move this piece of furniture over there, we got to sweep under there. Like this isn't, it's not a disaster, but like we can't live like this. Where do your eyes go first?
probably on like week one, I'll implement FinOptimal software and I'll go in and maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll just make sure that everything is like historically categorized correctly. And that I'm probably, assuming we're in like QuickBooks Online, I'm going to be, getting, slimming down the chart of accounts, getting things into like a very clean structure so that I use the kind of like parent and child accounts so that those will correspond to how I think about reporting. So if I'm going to report under the board, I probably want like five categories in my, my P&L, for example, and maybe some number of like X like main categories in the assets and the X categories and liabilities. And then things are going to fall under like sub buckets in each of those. And so I'm going to very much quickly like structure things in that way so that what I'll only report on is kind of those top level roll up accounts. And I'll rely on the system to kind of pass that data. And I'm not going to show all the kind of the sub level accounts. Like for me, I want to be able to track the, the data differences and have something that makes sense. But I don't, uh, I don't want to be doing like sums and like be manually manipulating data that I have to send to investors. In like my ideal world, the accounting basically 95% of it just happens. All the books I can close them by like day one. All of the reporting to the investors like is just always being refreshed. I'm going to use like your reporting tools, and then I can just download the file and just send it, or even just share access to it, and that's getting refreshed all the time. And the only way to do that is when you're giving data to your stakeholders, you also want the past data to be correct. So I kind of in tandem to kind of automating the accounting going forward and the reporting flows, I'm also going to kind of clean up the historicals so I can kind of trust the numbers. Um, if the company's small enough, it's okay to kind of clean up historicals because
Yeah.
no one really cares. If the company's large enough and like you've been reporting stuff, then you maybe need to figure out how to transition into like more proper accounting and then figure out if you have to footnote stuff. But that's kind of, it just depends. I would say probably if you're like before Series B, you can just completely redo all the accounting and then just send all the historical accounting back to the investors and say, I updated all the historical accounting. Here's everything going back to the beginning time. Boom. Like, and no one's gonna blink an eye or care. Um, Probably even later they won't care either, but it just depends. Like if you have, venture debt and banks and other stuff, then like that's a whole different story.
I think one thing that I'm hearing that we have a name for that I think um, describes the work you've done in all of the companies we've worked with you on, as well as a lot of the people you've referred us to, is this concept of a continuous close. The idea that you get as many things on autopilot as you can, not irresponsibly. You need controls where they belong, but you don't want it to have to be a process where you have to go and pull a lot of levers, press buttons, and turn knobs at the end of the month to get your investor deck ready for a board meeting or just even to report to the CEO, whatever it is. And I think that's an important through line.
Yeah.
100%. I think it's it's great to hear you say these things now, but as we've established, like you've been through it before. Right now, I feel like if you walk into a new business, they're hiring you because it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I can get Meir to work for me. Whatever you need, whatever you want, just like go do it. Now, what the reason I'm going to ask is I find a lot of people who are very smart accounting and finance folks, and they step into a new role and they feel afraid to rip the band-aid off. Or maybe there's other things out there that I don't recognize, but it's like they know on day one the accounting team, like this outsourced accounting agency that we've been using, isn't good. They're too slow. The chart of accounts is a mess. Nothing's done right, but I don't want to rock the boat. So, like, at what point in your career did you start feeling comfortable rocking the boat and being like, hey, things got to change and we're ripping the band-aid off in the beginning? Because I don't think people naturally step into a new role for the first time or even the second time feeling empowered to do that. So, like, how did you kind of develop those muscles and that gumption to say, we're doing it and we're doing it right now? And it's might be ugly for a little bit, but it's going to be worth it.
I think like it's two things. Number one, it's, you know, you should know that someone hired you because they trust you. So go take advantage of that and do it. Number two, um, they hired you, things are a mess. So they're not going to expect that things are going to not be a mess like the moment that you started. And so if things were already messy and not great, you have this kind of small window of time in which you can go attack stuff and cool, finance is still a mess. It's not fixed yet. Cool. Like this is your great major opportunity to go do that. And number three is like it kind of depends on your tolerance for pain. So to some extent, like when I was at Resolute and I was cleaning up the books, it took me a few months. There were some things that I was like trying to like fully tie out and get fixed because I redid the accounting was just so bad. I can't remember if it was Smith or Resolute, but one of these, it was just so bad. It was months and months, and I finally figured it out. Maybe it was actually at Spiff, and it turned out that like the R&D tax credit, which hadn't been claimed yet, was being like booked as a contra expense. Like it wasn't getting pushed to the balance sheet, so we weren't seeing an asset that was due to us. And it was like there was this moment. It was probably like I don't know, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. I was finally working through. I was like, ah, I figured it out. This is what it was. And so I think to some extent it's just do you have the drive to work through things until they you get everything right. And until you have a good handle on what the business is, I mean, all of your accounting is BS until then, right? Like to some extent, equity stuff is never going to be done right in early stage businesses. The equity accounting is the first thing that they're going to audit when you get to audit. So you better clean it up. Um, and assets that are kind of due to you, they're going to be off. You're going to very quickly get to learn the business if you go through all the accounting, because if you rip off that band-aid and you go through and you fix everything, assuming if you get in and it's great, awesome. But if it's a complete mess, you're going to learn. You'll know every vendor the business spends money with. You'll learn every customer. You will learn everything that the business is like spending money on or receiving money from, and it'll lead you down paths to learn the business in parallel to also working with the team. And so you just have to be willing to work those long hours, but it pays back itself, very quickly. Now, if you want to do that manually, then you'll end up looking like Jesse and me. So you do want to have good tools to do the cleanup. And so the only way I ever had the gumption to do this historical cleanup is because, Jesse built the editor tool, which allowed me to, which really, for his full service clients, which allows for kind of mass editing of the ledger. And, I was hands
with a
on
spreadsheet,
with a spreadsheet.
which at
So
the time was really not something people did.
I don't know if there are other tools in the market you do that with too today, but basically like imagine an Excel spreadsheet with your whole general ledger and you can just change what account it's in, change the description, change what, class, so what department something's getting booked to. And you could delete entries. So if someone booked these crazy weird journal entries that make no sense, you could mass go and delete them. And I could totally imagine going to business tomorrow and saying, okay, I'm just going to delete every single payroll journal entry ever, and I'm going to rebook them all myself. And I'm going to use like FinOptimal's Booker because, I'm going to build all my pipelines. In building pipelines, you can basically take all the raw data and you can generate journal entries out of those things. And if you can generate the journal entries, you can kind of have things automatically posted for you. And the great thing about building kind of pipelines is now everything is like really auditable. It's very clear where data came from. It's not that somebody, scratched it out on paper on a pencil and just manually summed it and you have no idea what the numbers are, where they came from. And you kind of get a sense of um, you can present numbers as your own. If you come in as a finance person and you just kind of, and things are a mess and you don't go and rip off the Band-Aid, then forever when someone says, are these the right numbers? You'll say, I don't know. Like you won't feel really good with it. And you'll end up with a footnote that says like everything before this date is not, who knows if it's correct. I mean, I looked at a friend's business and like never done cash reconciliations, like banks were like merged together into one. It was like a complete mess, right? And so the way to fix that is to go grab all the historical bank statements and just go month by month. And it's painful, but you should go do it and make sure that everything is there and everything is done. And at the end of the day, like it just means that things are cleaner and you don't have to have this thing that's keeping you up that like, I don't know, maybe our historical stuff is off and one day someone's going to come and bother me about that stuff. It's just off your head and it's painful for a month, but then you're done. Two
Yeah.
months, whatever.
So don't paint over rotting wood. Rip the wood out and put new wood in, and then paint it, and you'll be happy knowing that there's not mold growing in your wall. Is basically what you're saying. But you said like something about like ripping the Band-Aid off early on. Like when you come in and it's a mess. That's all I do. That's my entire job is to just say stuff like that. You said like when you come in, rip the Band-Aid off because the CEO is going to say, "Hey, I know it's a mess. I hired you because it's a mess. So like, yeah, I expect there to be a mess. And if you got to make a bigger mess to get rid of the mess, go for it." But how do you
CEO
handle
usually doesn't know how much of a mess something is.
right?
The
But how do you
CEO just
handle
knows they need somebody. The CEO doesn't know what your job is, and frankly, they kind of don't really care so much.
Yep.
The person that's going to care most about it is you. If you come to the CEO and says, "Do you think I should do this?" They'll say, like, "I don't know." Like they don't care. And so I think it's a stupid question to go to the CEO and say, "Should I do this?" In general, like you need to be able to form your own opinions of what's worthy and valuable of your time, and it shouldn't mean that you're not delivering something for other folks. The rest of the company, you're still delivering for them this whole time and figuring out how to work. But there are 24 hours in the day. Find some hours to sleep. But you should, go and fix stuff. And if you can't do it yourself because there's just so much on your plate, because the business is growing fast enough, then find partners that can help you do that cleanup. But
how
it's
do you balance that part though? Because I feel like I find people who go, well, I just got hired and like they just paid someone whatever they paid, $150,000 to be the VP of finance and they gave him a chunk of equity. And now they're like, well, I also need 3 grand a month, 5 grand a month for an accounting firm. And they're like, well, I hired you, you do it. And they're like, well, I'm a finance guy. Like I'm not a bookkeeper. Like, how should people think about navigating that? That's something you like scope out before you get in there. Like, hey, yeah, I'm coming, but I might also need resources. Or is that something you get in and you have to go back to the CEO and be like, hey, I'm putting more in the budget for me for this. Like, how do you wrestle with that kind of like give and take on budget on your own resources?
I mean, I think you should just be able to justify some sort of an ROI on that, right? So to the extent if you're going to spend, 50% of your time doing accounting manually, or you can find some folks that can help you reduce that work by 90% on your side, and then you
Good
can go
figure.
and then you can go do other work. So the ROI is like really clear and clean. You don't know what you don't know before you join a business in terms of what the complexity is. It's also kind of a good idea to figure out ways to create some amounts of separation of duties in terms of the function and the work you're doing. But in general, there are more valuable places for you to spend time in the business. And so while I said you might have pain for the first month or two and like working through some of the stuff or, working with a team to work through it, um, at the same time, like there are other places that you're also needed. So, functions that functions I owned when I started at Spiff, all of RevOps, IT, HR, deal desk, legal ops, finance, accounting, FP&A, equity, compliance, vendor management. So all those things. Now, some of those portfolios I gave away as the business grew, but I grabbed them all. Now, I wasn't hired to take over deal desk. I showed up and I said, that's a mess. Okay, that's mine now. And so you're going to find lots of messes around the business that you can just go quickly grab and take over if it's early stage enough. So go grab as many portfolios as you competently can handle. And I don't think anyone's going to complain that you're spending $3, $4, $5, $6,000 a month on some folks, because to some extent, that's way cheaper than hiring another full-time hire.
You talked about grabbing other portfolios, which I love, but I also find like whether it's grabbing or just like putting your hand on the steering wheel and somebody else already has it, maybe, right? Like there's going to be times where finance touches pretty much every part of the business. So like I've had conversation with folks who go, well, that can't change because sales says it has to stay that way. Something operational, right? Or engineering said no. And it's like, well, if they said yes, you'd save 3 days a week or 3 days a month. 3 days a week would be insane. How do you kind of get the other entities who may or may not respect accounting to play ball, to suit up, to lean in and say, okay, I'll help you. I understand it now. Because I feel like when all of those functions are working together, the entire business is better. But accounting, even in my experience, is very often the afterthought.
I mean, to some extent, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, relationships with the other executives in the business are important. And explain to folks what you need and why you need it in enough detail should be enough for them, or they should just respect you enough when you say that you need something. Um, if you're asking for a bunch of engineers to build you some stuff, then there better be a really good reason why you're pulling them away from their core work, which is kind of building product and selling to customers. And that there's real trade-offs there. If it's sales, to some extent, I can't think of a single thing that I might ask sales for that I couldn't do myself or implement myself. So if it's getting clean CRM data, well, take it on yourself. Like if you're in Salesforce, you can implement a little checkbox on an opportunity, and after that thing is checked, no data can be changed. You know who should update
Yeah,
the data? You know who should update all the data and make sure it's correct before that box is checked? You should do it until there's
I'm
some
always
comment.
reminded of my favorite Barack Obama quote where he talks about somebody in your organization that says, people who how do you get ahead? And people say, oh, hey, I want more responsibility. Hey, I'm really smart. Hey, I work really hard. And he says something like, what I really value is someone who says, it looks like we got a problem over here. Let me take care of that for you.
Right.
Just take care of
So,
it for him. It's great.
so do it. So at Spiff, I built a checkbox which said it was sales ops reviewed. Do you know who sales ops? Me. So sales AE would close the deal. They had 24 hours to edit the data. But even then, and after that, they just couldn't edit the data because like only admins could, or people with sales ops rights. And then what happens after when I review the data, I check it and I say it's sales ops reviewed, and then I would get a notification anytime data was changed after that by an admin or something, right? I can put in process. And so I can be sure that the CRM data is true. I can't tell you the number of finance people I meet. They say, "Oh, our CRM data is crap." I'll say, "Then just go like own it, and be the person that says, I'm going to make sure this data is correct, and I'm going to lock it down." Because, like, to some extent, I had so much trouble. I wanted to get our AEs to attach the file to Salesforce instead of, because at first we were just storing a Google Drive, which was a big mess. But I thought, I'm not gonna try and like yell at them or anything like that. We have like a close process, which is a little screen flow, and I just add a little question at the first thing. It says, have you attached the signed document to the Salesforce opportunity? Yes, no. If it said no, send them back. If they said yes, they went forward. If I then went to review an opportunity, the file wasn't there, I would go to them and say, did you hit yes by mistake? Guess how many times I had to do that, have that conversation?
Once for each person. Really? You never
Zero.
had to do that?
Zero. Never had to do it because all I did was I reminded them right at the beginning. They all mean to do well. They're all good people. Like it's very easy for someone to forget. But if you're saying,
It's
did
like
you do
Mayor,
this?
the most effective way to prevent speeding, they've learned is to have the sign that shows you your speed.
Basically, I mean, there's so many times I'm driving on the highway and like I didn't see the speed sign, and then like my Google Maps tells me I'm speeding. Like I didn't see the sign. Like I would change my speed limit when you're going through places if I saw the speed change. I don't want to get a ticket. Um, I don't go at the speed limit. I go like 6 miles over, 7 miles over, but whatever. Um, and so, for the life of me, I wish Google Maps would like audibly say the speed limit has changed as I'm driving. I
A
don't know
lot
why
of
they
new
don't.
cars do. They have
Okay,
they
well,
take a picture of the speed limit sign and they flash when you're speeding. It's
I
really
I
cool.
haven't driven new cars. I had an old car and now I have no
I'm,
car.
I'm impressed that you have a
Well,
car living in the city.
I had a car and it got flooded and then there was mold. We got rid of it, and you know what? Life without a car is way cheaper, in fact.
Agreed.
you know how they have the speeding thing where it's smiley face, frown, if you're going too fast or too slow. Have you seen that? People
No,
react to the emotion. So instead of saying like you're over the speed limit, it's a smiley face or a frown. And if you see the frown, people slow down.
no, that's cool.
You never saw that?
No, I like that.
That's
I
going to
like that
ruin my
idea.
bit, which was going to say they should have that for podcasting. When you talk about cars for too long, it starts showing you a frown instead of a smiley face. So that joke would have been
Thanks,
funnier if
thanks
you
for
knew what it
keeping us on
was.
topic. Tom, you
Uh,
ready to get back to topic? Because we can go so many places from here. We can get into self-driving
Yeah, you guys
cars,
are just Riff City over
automation.
here. Riff City,
Okay,
population,
all right.
Mayor and
All
Jesse.
right.
what are you even doing here?
I nothing. This is my only job is professional podcasting, and you've taken that from me as well. Um, so I have a really bad question for you. So everyone asks me this all the time, actually. We've already kind of answered like the first finance hire thing. People go, all right, great. Well, like, let's say I hire you and you're my outsourced accounting and finance function. You're automating a lot of my stuff. At what point do I go hire a second person? And you have done that working with us, where you've brought on other team members internally. How have you navigated that? Like, you in your mind, like you said, day one, week one, you're looking, how can I bring in automation? You said this company, FinOptimal, I think, FinOptimal. That's what you said, right? That's what you bring them in on week one, whoever those guys are, and then you automate as much as you can. But then later on, you bring in somebody else. Why?
Would have been funny if you had misspelled it.
I'm really good at spelling.
His mother was an English teacher.
Yeah,
Is
it's
an
just
English teacher still?
retired.
Retired.
So, the way I think about kind of all general job hires is I kind of look at my time. Um, Number one, if I haven't done a role before, I kind of want to do it first myself and become really good at it at least one time in my career so that I know what I'm hiring for, so that when I'm hiring, I can like actually screen that person. So I should generally know what they're doing, and it makes it easier to oversee, but also it makes me understand like what does the job entail? Maybe I can lay some groundwork for them to do it, at least for those first hires. Past that, that's maybe a different story. Um, and then you should probably maybe carve out your time. So when I was thinking of my first hire I made at Spiff was for assistant controller. Now, like kind of I was looking for someone who was um maybe a strong kind of manager, senior manager that was kind of strong enough that I wasn't hiring someone junior, they don't know what they're doing, and kind of hungry enough to learn and do more. And so I kind of looked at all my various kind of portfolios, and specifically under like the accounting front, and I looked at, okay, what percentage of my time in a month do I spend on these kind of functions? And so in doing so, um, those you can kind of can you sum up to enough work, like on 120% of a job or something like that, where you can justify bringing someone on, and like what does that allow you to do with the rest of your time? Because you're probably getting pulled into other areas of the business. And with hindsight, you can probably make those hires sooner if you understand kind of the growth of the business, and because you need time to ramp those folks up and there's more things for you to do. So the faster a business is growing, kind of the faster you might need to pull those triggers. In general, um, for me, it's a little bit of like responsiveness that you can have by having someone in-house. So to some extent, if you're doing like accounts payable stuff internally that you have to work with internal stakeholders, well, you need someone who's going to work with your team internally and, make sure that, these bills are kind of authorized to be paid or any questions on them. A lot of stuff has gotten better these days. Maybe you can automate some of that stuff with Ramp. But if you have a lot of questions from customers, and a lot of kind of manual follow-up you have to do with customers on bills, if there's audit work you need to do, if there is, work having to do with um, payroll, there's just lots of different portfolios you can come up with all across the board where suddenly, having someone else will free you up to do other work. So it really just kind of depends how big the company gets and kind of how complicated all those various that work is. And that just expands the more complicated your business gets, which you should attempt really hard to keep your business not complicated. So like if you can keep yourself a single, Delaware C Corp and not have international entities, do that. It pays for itself. If you can keep your
Amen.
business on PEO and not have to deal with all the different state agencies and all the filings and the mistakes that will happen, even if you have an entity filing on your behalf and all of the stuff you have to respond to, stay on a PEO. By the way, it's probably also the right financial decision, absent that, but the amount of work that it would require to be off a PEO is enormous. Um, and just you do certain of these things. You can still hire internationally, just like use an employer of record. Um, I hired a deal desk manager in my last year at Spiff. I should have hired the person a year prior. By the time I hired that person, it was taking up like probably 60% of my time. And I was probably working like 1.5x or 2x, right? So it was kind of more than it was definitely more than a full-time job already, and I was doing it myself. And it just meant I wasn't able to be as responsive to the sales team, and it was just too much, right? And so to some extent, right, like seeing where your time is going can help you define where you should hire other folks. Um, and like maybe if you have outsourced team, you might need less of their service. So like when we were at Spiff, we were probably using, I don't know, probably 10 to 20 hours a month of actual kind of human work that was happening on your end because a lot of it we were handling in-house. And that just meant that like we were our own client number one. If I wanted something done and I needed it done by the next morning, then I can get it done. I didn't have to kind of rely on a third party, which is kind of prioritizing their customers and their work level. A lot of stuff can get automated, but some extent, like maybe I want to make sure that the bank reconciliations are done. Well, when you guys are doing it for your clients, you go through all your clients, and then some people are first, some people are last, and that's okay. And like maybe this is years ago. Maybe now you have more staff and like people can like pay for themselves in prioritization line or whatever it is. But for us at the time, it was I just wanted it done on day one, like right away. Like the bank statements are out, I wanted stuff reconciled because I wanted to kind of move forward. And so for us, like we were just very much on it and you're using the tools and using the automation and that's how we handled it. Like even if the formal reconciliation was going to happen by you guys later, we were kind of doing like a mini one ourselves, just like really quickly. And we were just on top of all of our stuff.
Mayor, I think the idea of looking at your own time spent, I'm reminded of the Dan Martell book, Buy Back Your Time, who he kind of says that kind of model for figuring out who to hire next. Somebody's like, oh, you got to get someone to do this for. Well, am I spending a lot of time doing that? How do I? The billing system's a great example. Whether it's hiring someone or else building some automation, we did that maybe 6 months ago too, where we were spending a ton of time on billing, and time is money, and time and it's error it's about errors and it's about efficiency. So I think that makes a lot of sense. If
What are
you
you
could look
using now?
back, what
What are you using now?
we built, I mean, we vastly improved our own.
Okay.
So, we improved the experience of managing multiple subscriptions instead of, we had to do a lot of it on the back end in Stripe and with a lot of sort of jerry rigging. And it was taking a significant amount of not just Tom's time, but his team's time. And it was a heavy lift. It was a heavy lift from a lot of front end development, which is slower for us than back end. And but it was worth it because the time saved every month. We got to do billing every month, and we got a lot of accounting firms that were billing in bulk that want to change, reallocate. Clients come and go. Um, if I ask you to look back over your career from here to from any one of your jobs in particular, what are the 1 to 2 mistakes that you might help other people learn from yours instead of them making themselves? If you could try to generalize it, what would you do differently?
Um, I'd probably hire a little earlier for each of the roles that I needed. I would probably free up more of your time to spend them in other parts of the business, as more than you already are. You know, the kind of relationship work, there's never enough of that. And there's just always more that you can give to other parts of the business and become an even better business partner. And so, in general, there's a great value to having a ship that runs really smoothly, but there are other parts of the business that need more. And they don't always know what they need. And I'd say the more time you can spend with other parts of the business, the more value that you can bring to them. And think about building almost like a business enablement function and have that as your North Star. Some things need to happen, like accounting needs to happen, but that's not itself serving the business. Some portions, if you can get like an automated data flow of all the accounting so that marketing can have a clear view of everything and a source of truth, that is serving the business. But other parts of the business really don't care. Like sales doesn't care to see financials, engineering doesn't care. Like they don't care. Um,
Yeah.
to some extent, like obviously people care if the business hits their numbers, people care what their budgets are, if they can hire more team members, but they don't care on a month-to-month basis. Like, you're the one who cares about that stuff and it's most important to you. And it's super important, when it comes to acquisition or it comes to fundraising or it comes to kind of financial diligence. But that's like your own house and you should have your house in order and it should be very much like beyond reproach. But, the rest of the business always has other needs. So kind of really spending time to kind of help other parts of the business. Um, I'd say that it's always a good time to kind of automate away your job as much as possible anywhere that you can. Because in general, there is always better work. Anyone who thinks like they shouldn't automate away their job because they're not gonna like have a job is really thinking about it incorrectly. And I've done that in every job since like my probably my second one out of college, just find ways to automate away my job. Um, and I think that it's a really good mindset to have
It
because
shows a lot of confidence in your abilities. It says, yeah, there'll be other things that I can figure out after that. I'm not going to try to hold on to something that I know can be automated.
I have a
basically,
final question for you on the automating your job.
go
Tech
for it.
stack draft right now, May 2025, walking in day one. What's your tech stack to automate as much as possible?
QuickBooks, Ramp, probably get a billing system, depending on the volume, but you might not need it day one, but pretty within the first like 6 months, get a billing system and get one that fits your business. Every business is different and has different needs. Salesforce, um, ideally as early as possible because your business is going to kind of grow to need the complexity there. On the equity side, it's going to be probably have some sort of a cap table management system. So that's probably going to be a Carta. If you want, you could use a pulley, or I'm friends with the guys at Slice, and they're building a replacement of both of those. So if you're going international, maybe just go straight to them. Depending on what billing system you get, make sure you get sales tax in order. So um, make sure that it integrates with whatever system you're using for billing. So ideally, you're showing up there's a billing system in place, and you can get sales tax in place right away. But just make sure it integrates with the system you're using. But don't shy away from that because the dollars can escalate really quickly. On the accounting side, FinOptimal, obviously. Um,
Jesse
so
was sweating. I could see the drops forming on his head from here that you weren't going to say FinOptimal.
Yeah, we were kind of far down the list, but you're going to go on to say how you draw all the other tools together in your accounting system
What?
with the.
Yeah.
Okay, let him say it. Let him say
Yeah.
it.
Sorry. No, I didn't hear payroll yet either. So I need that.
payroll, get yourself a PEO. Weirdly enough, if you're a small business, if you're pretty small, then like something like AdjustWorks works nicely. If you're larger and you're doing a lot of kind of manual one-off payments, then make sure you're on a PEO that can kind of take data uploads for your payroll. So something like an ADP Workforce Now works really nicely. It has its quirks, but once you learn it, it works really well. And as an added bonus, you get an API there, so you can do
You have
fun
to
things.
pay for it though.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have to, but so whatever.
All right,
So
you have to pay for everybody's now. Even Intuit's making you pay.
yeah, I don't know how that's affecting you guys. Um, but
Jesse cut my salary because of it.
It's got to
From
come out of somewhere,
Yeah, from
You got
five
to steal
dollars
from
from
Peter to pay
$5
Paul.
a month to zero. I'm now working for free completely.
mm,
So we hit them
well,
all. We hit them
yeah.
all. We hit Ramp, few different PEOs, QBO. I'm surprised you didn't say NetSuite.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I would why wouldn't you buy something that Oracle hasn't invested in and never will invest in again and has
So
no
surprised you
engineering
didn't say
support?
that. Yeah, I'm surprised.
All right, we're
I
throwing
feel
shade.
like just a big shout out to those out there that are thinking about going multi-entity. QuickBooks now has multi-entity support with their enterprise plans. So try that before going to NetSuite. Um, or if you really need uh, something in between, there are new players, but accounting is hard and um, tried and true works nicely.
I love
The
it.
you know it's funny, Jesse. We were trying to see if you could build on NetSuite's API, and like their API limits were way lower than what QuickBooks was, and
I remember that.
it's just like the same reason why Zero has API limits and all these
Yeah,
tools that are suddenly you can't do everything you want to do. And to those out there saying, well, why would you ever hit any API limits? Um,
right. I do
I'd
remember
say
that.
I don't believe as much as possible, avoid subledgers. Sometimes a subledger can make sense, but most of the time, if you can get as much as your real core data in your ERP as possible, then when you report out of your ERP, all your data is there. So you're going to have some subledgers, like your cap table is going to be in their cap table system, but maybe don't reduce all of your revenue data down to a single like two-line entry in a journal entry every month. Maybe you want to get revenue by customer, by
My
month,
product.
by product, and by tied to any specific invoice line.
Sure.
Maybe same thing with all of your accruals. And in general, did I have some subledgers? Yeah, we had travel as a subledger because we were in a separate system and it was coming out, and I didn't feel like booking everything individually, and it didn't matter to me. Going back, maybe I should have found a pipeline to book it all, but at the time I was like, it doesn't matter. And so I had travel as a subledger. But aside from that, everything was in QuickBooks. I think I was talking to an FP&A provider and they looked at our system and they said that we were in the 99th percentile in like standard deviations of like amount of actual entries in our system. And
Right.
that's not a bad thing, right? You just have a lot of great core, high fidelity data. And if anyone wants to audit your stuff, it's all right there. It's not, well, what is that? Well, here's this other subledger. How'd you get that? Oh, it's a spreadsheet that's sitting here. And that's how you have the rise of all these like tools like the flowcasts and the numerics and other stuff in the world that are a whole close process when your checklist should be pretty simple because if most of your accounting is automated, you don't need a ton of like accounting close checklists. Your accounting close is pretty smooth because you're not doing all this like web of work to try and get stuff in there and lots of weird spreadsheets and subledgers and things. Like in theory, the accounting should just happen.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's our core philosophy, right? We treat QBO like a database, put everything in there, make it be your source of truth. And that's why you're our guy. That's why you're our 3-time, 4-time, however many time
But
customer of the year. 10 years running customer of the year, 4-time customer, Meir Rotenberg. Thank you for coming on our world renowned podcast.
Which world is this?
That's like the guy who commented on LinkedIn, what planet am I on? Exactly.
I remember that guy. Yeah.
What a great way to
I'm
what a
still
great
not
way to
over
wrap
that.
it.
Yeah.
All right.
Goodbye.